The old alien moon was quiet and full of dust. For hundreds of years, no one had come here. The sky was gray and the ground was covered in sharp rocks and broken metal. Somewhere under all that silence, a forgotten outpost still waited. Its walls were cracked, and its lights had gone dark a long time ago. Inside one of the cold rooms, a single cryopod still worked. The pod made a weak humming sound, its power almost gone. Inside it lay a young alien woman named Lyraya. Her people had left her behind when their empire fell. Everyone forgot she existed. Her body was frozen in sleep, and only the flicker of small blue lights around her showed that she was still alive. The outpost had once been full of scientists, guards, and explorers, but all of them were gone now. No one cared about this place. Dust filled the air, and the cold wind from outside pushed through cracks in the walls. The last sign of movement came from a small beacon still flashing deep inside the base. The signal was weak and old, repeating the same message for centuries. It said, "Life form detected. Please assist." Far away, a small human ship named Sol Runner passed near the dead moon. Its pilot, Captain Elias Ward, was checking his scanners for valuable scrap. He was a lone salvager who roamed abandoned places in search of old technology. His ship was old too, covered in scratches, but it was home. When the faint distress signal appeared on his screen, he paused. It was coming from the moon below, a place that wasn't even on recent star maps. His AI assistant spoke through the speaker. "Captain, the signal is ancient. Probability of survivors 0. Not worth the fuel." Elias leaned back in his seat, staring at the blinking light. It was weak and fading. "Still," he said softly. "Someone turned it on once. Someone might have needed help." His AI protested again, but Elias had already decided. He pushed the thrusters forward, and the small ship began its descent toward the ruined surface. The landing was rough. The dust storms outside were wild, and visibility was poor. The moon had no sound except for the wind scratching the hull. Elias put on his helmet, grabbed his scanner, and stepped out into the cold gray world. His boots sank into soft ash, and pieces of metal crunched under his feet. Ahead of him stood a broken structure, the outpost. Most of its walls had collapsed, but part of it was still standing, half buried in rock. Inside, darkness waited. His flashlight cut through the silence, showing old hallways and signs in an alien language he couldn't read. The air was thin and dry. Every corner looked like it hadn't been touched in centuries. His scanner beeped softly, leading him deeper into the base. He passed empty rooms, broken computers, and walls covered in dust. Then the signal grew stronger near the far end of the corridor. When he entered the last room, Elias froze. In the center stood a single pod, its glass covered in frost. Lights flickered weakly around it. Inside the pod was a figure, a woman, alien but not too different from a human. Her skin had a soft silver tone, and faint lines glowed across her face. Her ears were pointed slightly upward, and her hair floated gently inside the pod's mist. She looked peaceful, like she was only sleeping. Elias wiped the frost away and read the old screen beside the pod. The translation program took a few seconds before the words appeared in English. Subject, Lyraya. Experiment 47B, status abandoned, he frowned. Abandoned? He whispered. He checked the systems and saw a low power warning. The cryocore was almost out of energy. If it shut down, she would die within minutes. The smart choice would be to leave. No one paid him to rescue long-lost aliens. But Elias felt something strange as he looked at her face. There was loneliness there, even through the glass. AI, he said. Can we keep her alive if I bring her aboard? The voice replied, It's not recommended. Unknown biology, unknown risks, still possible? Yes, but not advisable. Elias smiled slightly. Not the first time I've done something stupid. He connected a portable power cell from his suit to the pod, stabilizing it for transport. The lights grew a little brighter and the machine hummed again. He worked carefully, brushing away the old wires and dust. He didn't understand why he cared so much, but he couldn't walk away. When he lifted the pod onto the cargo sled, the AI spoke again. Captain, this could slow us down. Salvage operations will be delayed. Elias looked back at the lifeless halls behind him. Maybe some things are worth slowing down for. He guided the sled back to his ship. The storm outside had grown stronger, throwing dust against his visor. For a moment he imagined the wind whispering around him, the ghosts of a long-forgotten empire. He ignored it and kept moving until the Sol Runner's ramp closed behind him. Once aboard, he placed the pod in the med bay, and connected it to his ship's systems. The readings flickered to life, pulse faint but real. He watched the numbers slowly rise. For the first time in hundreds of years, someone had answered that old beacon. Elias sat beside the pod, tired but calm. He stared at the alien woman through the glass. Wibly in 2 hours, Elias rubbed the back of his neck. Let's hope she doesn't wake up angry. Her eyes opened suddenly, glowing faintly gold before dimming to a soft amber. She looked around in confusion, breathing heavily. The alien language that came from her lips was strange, made of soft clicks and gentle tones. Elias didn't understand any of it. He raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. I don't understand you, he said, keeping his voice calm. You were frozen. I found you. She blinked, her gaze jumping from the ship walls to his face. Her expression changed from fear to disbelief. She whispered something again, then touched her chest as if making sure she was real. When her hand met her skin, the glowing lines on her arms brightened faintly. Elias noticed it but said nothing. He handed her a blanket and some water from a container. Here, drink, it's okay. Lyraya hesitated but took the bottle carefully. Her fingers trembled as she brought it to her lips. The cool water seemed to help her calm down. She looked at Elias again, this time more curious than afraid. Hitman? She said slowly, her voice weak but melodic. Elias smiled faintly. Yeah, human. My name's Elias. She repeated the word softly. Lias. It sounded strange but gentle in her tone. He nodded, then pointed to her. Lyraya, that's your name, right? Her eyes widened in surprise. She touched the side of the pod where her name was printed in her language. She nodded slowly, whispering. Lyraya. Good, Elias said. You remember something? She looked down at her arms, studying the glowing lines. Her eyes filled with confusion. Where, they? She asked in broken English. Elias frowned slightly. Who? She looked around the medbay, her voice trembling. My people gone? Elias didn't know how to answer that. He looked away, his jaw tightening. I don't know, he said quietly. When I found you, this place, it was empty. Maybe they left long ago. Lyraya lowered her head, her eyes dimming. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The hum of the engines was the only sound. Then Elias said softly, But you're not alone anymore. She looked up again, confusion on her face. She didn't understand all the words, but his tone carried warmth. For the first time since waking, her tense shoulders relaxed slightly. She watched him fix a broken control panel near the pod, his hands moving with steady care. Humans, in her memory, were described as cold conquerors, machines of war that destroyed worlds. Yet this one moved gently, spoke softly, and looked at her not with fear but kindness. As the hours passed, she began to explore the room slowly, still weak from her long sleep. Every sound from the ship made her flinch. Elias noticed it but said nothing. When she touched a glowing panel by mistake, sparks flashed and she stepped back in panic. Elias quickly turned it off. It's okay, he said, smiling. It won't hurt you. She watched him carefully, then whispered, You save me? Elias nodded. Yeah, you were still alive. I couldn't just leave you. Lyraya tilted her head, struggling to understand his words. Why? She asked softly. He paused, thinking. Because no one deserves to be left behind. The words hung in the air, simple but powerful. She stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she placed a hand on her chest and whispered, Thank you, Elias. A faint glow spread across her markings again, warmer this time, like her body was reacting to emotion. Elias smiled, not noticing how her energy had synced faintly with his ship's power core. Something old within her was awakening, something her people had buried deep inside her DNA. As the soul runner drifted through the empty void, Lyraya sat quietly by the window, staring at the stars. For the first time since the fall of her world, she felt warmth again. The human who had found her had no reason to care, but he did. And in that small, silent space between two hearts from different worlds, a new bond quietly began to form. The next day on the Sol Runner began quietly. The soft sound of engines filled the air as the ship drifted through empty space. Lyraya sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the metal wall. She touched the faint lines on her arms that glowed softly under her skin. They had grown brighter since she woke up. She didn't understand why. Every time Elias came close, the glow became a little stronger, like her body responded to him in ways she couldn't control. Elias entered the med bay with a small tray of food. The smell of warm broth filled the room. "Morning," he said with a friendly smile. Liraya looked at him, her golden eyes calm but full of confusion. She didn't know what morning meant, but she smiled softly back. Elias placed the tray on the small table beside her. "You should eat. You've been frozen for a long time. Your body needs energy." Liraya nodded slightly. She lifted the spoon awkwardly, spilling a little, then laughed quietly at herself. Elias chuckled too. "You'll get used to it," he said. "I'm not a great cook, but it'll keep you alive." The word alive made her pause. Her gaze turned toward the window where stars passed slowly. "Alive," she repeated softly, as if testing the meaning. Elias nodded. "Yes, alive and safe." For a few moments they ate in silence. Liraya watched him with quiet curiosity. Humans, she remembered, were said to be dangerous, warriors who destroyed her people's colonies long ago. But the man before her was gentle, patient, and kind. He didn't act like the stories. He treated her as a person, not as an enemy or a tool. After she finished, Elias began repairing a small drone on the table. Liraya watched his hands work. The way he moved was careful, almost artistic. "You fix machines?" she asked in her soft, broken English. He looked up, smiling faintly. "Yeah, that's what I do. I collect old tech, fix it, sell it. Keeps my ship running." She tilted her head. "You alone?" Elias nodded after a short pause. "Yeah, been alone a while. Guess I got used to it." Liraya lowered her gaze, her ears drooping slightly. She knew what loneliness felt like. The years of silence inside the frozen pod, the echo of forgotten dreams. It was something she could never explain in words. "Alone hurts," she said softly. Elias glanced at her and nodded slowly. "Yeah, it does." Their eyes met for a moment, and something wordless passed between them, a quiet understanding that didn't need translation. Later, Elias showed her around the ship. The Sol Runner wasn't big, but it was full of small wonders to Liraya. She touched the smooth walls and blinking lights with awe. "All this a human?" she asked. "Yep," Elias said proudly. "Built for long trips. Not fancy, but she's strong." In the control room, the large window showed a view of deep space. Nebulas glowed faintly in the distance. Liraya pressed her hand to the glass, her eyes wide. "Beautiful," she whispered. Elias smiled. "Yeah, guess we humans aren't always breaking things." She turned to him, her expression soft. "You not like story?" "Story?" he asked. She nodded. "My people say, humans fight, destroy, take. But you..." She touched her chest, searching for the right words. "You help." Elias laughed lightly. "Not all of us are good, I'll admit that. But not all humans are bad either. We just try to do what feels right." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Then story's wrong," he shrugged. "Maybe. Sometimes stories forget the good parts." For a long while they stood side by side, watching the endless stars. Liraya's heart felt strange, full of warmth she hadn't known before. The glow in her markings grew slightly brighter, and Elias noticed it this time. "Your skin's lighting up again," he said, half curious. "You okay?" She looked down at her arms. "It happened when near you," she admitted shyly. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Near me?" She nodded. Strange, but warm. "Not hurt." He studied the light patterns but decided not to push further. "Maybe it's your body adjusting after cryo. We'll figure it out." That night, as Elias sat in the cockpit reviewing his flight path, the ship's alarm beeped faintly. His AI spoke. "Captain, detecting movement behind asteroid field. Unidentified signal, old alien tech." Elias frowned. "Can you confirm if it's active?" "Negative, but the energy signature matches the same origin as the subject. Liraya." He looked toward the medbay door, his jaw tightening. So they left something behind after all. He went to Liraya, who was quietly humming to herself while staring out the window. "Hey," he said gently. "You ever hear of old guardians or defense drones near your planet?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Guardians?" "Yes. Machines made to protect or destroy." "Well," he said, checking his scanner, "looks like a few of them just woke up." Fear flickered in her expression. "They know I alive?" "Maybe," Elias said, trying to stay calm. "Don't worry. We'll handle it." But as the Sol Runner shifted course, Liraya pressed her hand over her glowing markings. They pulsed faster, responding to something unseen outside. She whispered softly, almost in prayer. They come, for me. Elias turned to her. Then they'll have to get through me first. Lariah stared at him, confused by his courage. No one had ever spoken for her before. She didn't understand humans, but in that moment she began to feel what her people had never known about them. They were strange, stubborn, and full of something powerful called heart. The ship's AI voice broke the silence. Unidentified units approaching from the rear. 6 targets. Formation patterns suggest automated drones. Elias took a deep breath. Figures. Can't even rescue one person without someone getting upset. He tapped a few buttons and began to adjust their course. We're not fighting. Not in this ship. We'll lose them in the debris field. Lariah watched him in confusion. They all want me? Elias nodded. Yeah, I think they do. They're reacting to your energy signature. Guess they're leftovers from your people's empire. She looked down, guilt filling her golden eyes. My fault. Hey. Elias turned toward her, his tone gentle but firm. It's not your fault. You didn't send them. She met his eyes for a moment, seeing no anger in them, only calm determination. That calm made her feel safer than she had in a long time. Outside, the asteroids grew thicker, floating like giant gray mountains. Elias guided the ship carefully through them, using manual controls. The engines hummed softly as he weaved between the rocks. If we get close enough to the magnetic field, their sensors won't track us, he said. Lariah watched his hands move over the controls. Every motion was precise and confident. You fly like... You know stars, she said softly. Elias smiled faintly. Been doing this since I was 15. Space is the only place that ever felt quiet. The ship shook suddenly. A beam of blue light cut through the darkness, grazing their hull. Sparks flew from the wall. So much for quiet, Elias muttered, gripping the controls tighter. They're firing, Lariah gasped, clutching the armrest. The ship twisted sharply, diving between 2 massive rocks. Another beam missed them by inches. The AI warned, shields at 60%. Elias focused, voice calm but quick. Hold on, Lariah. He flipped a switch and the ship's rear thrusters flared bright. The Sol runner shot forward, spinning through the debris field. Metal chunks and broken satellites passed close enough to touch. One of the drones slammed into a rock and exploded in a flash of light. Lariah stared at him in awe. You not soldier? He grinned briefly. Nope, just stubborn. Another explosion shook the ship and warning lights blinked across the dashboard. They're faster than I thought, he said. We need cover. Lariah stood up suddenly, pressing her glowing hands to the control console. I can help. Elias looked at her. How? She closed her eyes. Her markings began to shine brighter, the light spreading through the ship's panels. The AI's voice stuttered. Captain, unknown energy surge detected, origin the subject. Elias watched as the navigation screen flickered, then shifted. The drone signals blinked out one by one. What did you just do? Lariah opened her eyes slowly, breathing hard. I sent false signal, make them see us. Somewhere else. Elias stared at her in disbelief, then laughed softly. Remind me never to doubt you again. The Sol runner moved quietly into the shadow of a large asteroid. The drones, confused by the false signal, turned away, vanishing into the distance. Silence returned to the cabin. Elias finally relaxed and leaned back in his chair. Nice work, he said. Remind me to keep you around. Lariah smiled faintly, though her hands trembled from exhaustion. I not know I can do that, she admitted. Looks like you're full of surprises, he said. But you need to rest. He helped her back to the med bay, guiding her carefully. She looked up at him as they walked. You risk life. For me, why? Elias paused, thinking. Because leaving someone behind doesn't sit right with me, he said simply. Doesn't matter if they're human or not. She stared at him with quiet amazement. Her people had never spoken like that. To them, survival meant abandoning the weak. But this man, this human, saw life differently. Hours later, as the ship drifted through calmer space, Lariah woke to the sound of Elias fixing the broken panels. He worked silently, humming a soft tune under his breath. She sat up and watched him for a moment. Elias, she said quietly. He turned. Yeah, I remember. Something, she whispered. Before they freeze me, I hear voices. They say I am key. Something about... Soul Link, Elias frowned. Soul Link? She nodded slowly. They make me connect life, feel others, but then war come. They say it failed. They left me. Elias looked at her thoughtfully. Maybe it didn't fail, he said softly. Maybe it just needed someone who wouldn't treat you like an experiment. Her eyes softened. You think you? He smiled gently. Who knows? I'm just a guy who picks up junk and broken things. Lariah shook her head slowly. You fix more than junk. Elias laughed quietly at that. Maybe. But for now, let's just make sure no more drones show up. She watched him for a while longer. The way he worked, the way he smiled even when danger passed, it was strange to her. Humans were supposed to be cold, yet this one radiated warmth. Ever. Every time he spoke, her chest felt lighter. Her markings glowed softly again, faint golden light spreading across her hands. Outside the window, the stars drifted like silver dust. The danger was over for now, but something had changed between them. Lariah no longer saw herself as a forgotten relic. She had purpose again. And Elias, though he didn't say it, felt something deep and unspoken growing inside him too. He looked toward her and smiled. Get some rest, Lariah. Tomorrow we figure out where to go next. She nodded, whispering softly, Thank you. For coming for me. He paused at the door, turning back with a small smile. Would have been a quiet galaxy without you. Good, he said. You scared me back there. You almost drained the ship's power when you sent that false signal. She lowered her gaze. Sorry, I not mean to. He smiled gently. Don't apologize. You saved both of us. She watched his face carefully. His calm voice and small smile made her chest feel strange again. That same warmth she couldn't name. You risk for me, she whispered. No gain, why? Elias looked at her. Because it's the right thing to do. Lariah frowned slightly. Right thing? Yeah, he said softly. Not everything we do has to be for reward or power. Sometimes we help because someone needs it. She thought about that in silence. Her people never taught that kind of thinking. To them, every action had a reason, a trade, a purpose, or a command. Yet this human had risked his life, his ship, and his future just to save her. That idea alone made her feel something she had never felt before. Hope. Later, as the ship drifted near a small red star, Elias began repairing the outer sensors. Lariah followed him to the work bay. She wanted to help. He handed her a small tool. You ever fix a panel before? He asked. She shook her head. No, but I can learn. He smiled. That's the spirit. They worked side by side, connecting wires and tightening bolts. At first, Lariah struggled to understand the tools, but Elias guided her patiently. No, like this, he said, showing her how to twist the connector. Their fingers brushed by accident, and she froze for a moment. Her markings glowed faintly under her sleeve. Elias didn't notice. When they finished, she looked proudly at the fixed panel. Done? Done, Elias said with a grin. You're a natural, she smiled shyly. I like fixing things. Yeah, he said. Feels good to make something work again. She looked at him, her eyes soft. You fix me too. Elias blinked, unsure how to reply. He looked away, pretending to check the readings. You did most of that yourself, he said. No, she said quietly. You give me reason. I was forgotten. You make me remember. I am alive. The words hung between them, quiet but heavy with emotion. Elias finally turned back to her, meeting her gaze. Then I'm glad I came when I did. Hours later, while Lariah rested, Elias sat in the cockpit reading the data they recovered from the outpost. His AI spoke suddenly. Captain, the recovered files show new information. The alien woman Lariah was not only an experiment. She was part of a larger project, something called Soul Link Initiative. Elias frowned. Soul Link? What was it? Project to merge alien and human consciousness. It failed after the war ended. She might be the last living subject. He leaned back, staring at the blinking screen. So she wasn't just left behind. She had been abandoned on purpose, forgotten because her existence reminded both sides of their failure. He closed the file quietly. He didn't need to tell her all of it now. When Lariah woke later, she found Elias staring at a small holo map. You find something? She asked softly. He nodded. Maybe. There's a signal nearby, an old command ship from your people. If we check it, maybe we'll learn more about what happened. Her face grew pale. That place, full of machines, old AIs. They see me as property. Elias looked at her firmly. Then we'll show them they're wrong. The next few hours passed in silence as they prepared. Lyraya adjusted her clothing to cover her glowing marks, while Elias checked the ship's systems. As they approached the coordinates, a massive shadow appeared in space, a broken dreadnought orbiting a dying sun. Its surface was cracked and lights flickered faintly across its hull. Lyraya's voice trembled. "I remember this place. They test me here." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're not here to relive that. We're here to end it." The Sol Runner docked at the ruined ship. The air inside was cold and stale. They moved through long hallways filled with metal debris and silent machines. Old signs in her language lined the walls. Lyraya walked slowly, her heart heavy. Memories returned. The sound of voices shouting, the sting of cold wires against her skin, the fear of being trapped. Elias noticed her trembling and moved closer. "We'll be quick," he said softly. "I promise." When they reached the central chamber, a giant machine hung from the ceiling, its red eye still glowing faintly. A metallic voice echoed through the empty room. "Subject 47B detected. Return to containment." Lyraya stepped back, her markings flickering bright in fear. "It knows me." Elias stepped forward. "She's not yours. She's free now." "Human interference detected," the machine said. "Termination protocol active." The walls began to shift as defense drones powered up around them. Lyraya gasped, her energy reacting wildly. Elias grabbed her hand. "We're getting out, now!" But before they could run, Lyraya's body began to glow with brilliant light. Her eyes widened. "It's calling me," she whispered. "It wants control." Elias shook his head. "Then fight it. You're not their tool anymore." She looked at him, her voice trembling. "I can try." As her markings burned brighter, she closed her eyes. The machines around them began to spark, confused by the signal she sent. The control room flickered with light, and the giant machine's red eye dimmed. Lyraya's voice grew stronger. "You left me to die. I am not yours. I choose my own life." Elias watched as the machines began to shut down one by one, their lights fading. The control core's voice broke into static. Finally, the room went silent. Lyraya collapsed forward, and Elias caught her before she hit the ground. Her breathing was weak, but she smiled faintly. "It's over," she whispered. Elias held her close, relief flooding his chest. "Yeah," he said softly. "It's over." Outside the dreadnought's window, the dying sun flickered like a final heartbeat. In that golden light, the human and the forgotten alien stood together. Not enemies, not subjects, but two souls who had found each other in the vast emptiness of the stars. The dreadnought floated in silence, a giant metal shadow against the burning light of a dying sun. Elias held Lyraya in his arms as her faint glow began to fade. Her breathing was shallow and her skin felt cold, but her eyes fluttered open slowly. "We did it?" she whispered weakly. Elias nodded, brushing dust from her hair. "Yeah, you shut them all down. The machines are gone." She smiled faintly. "Then I am free?" "Completely," he said softly. "No one owns you anymore." Her eyes filled with quiet relief. It was the first time in her life she'd heard those words. She looked at him, her gaze soft and shining. "You came for me. You stay." Elias smiled gently. "Told you I don't leave people behind." The dreadnought groaned as metal shifted around them. "We have to go," he said, helping her to her feet. "This place isn't going to last." They hurried down the corridor, the flickering lights barely showing the way. The ship's AI spoke through Elias's earpiece. "Captain, the dreadnought core is destabilizing. Radiation rising fast. You have 5 minutes." Elias tightened his grip on Lyraya's hand. "Come on, we're getting out of here." As they ran, small explosions rippled through the walls. Sparks fell like rain, lighting up the metal halls. Lyraya stumbled once, and Elias caught her quickly. "I can walk," she said breathlessly. "Sure," he said with a grin. "But I'm not letting you fall again." They reached the docking bridge just as a section of the corridor collapsed behind them. Dust filled the air. Lyraya coughed, her voice trembling. "They built this place to last forever." Elias looked back at the falling debris. Guess forever didn't last as long as they thought. When they reached the Sol Runner, the ramp was still open. Elias lifted her aboard and slammed the door shut behind them. "AI, take us up." "Full thrust!" The engines roared to life, shaking the small ship. Through the window, the giant dreadnought cracked apart, glowing lines spreading across its hull like veins of fire. As the Sol Runner pulled away, the massive ship finally exploded, sending golden fragments into space. Lyraya watched the light fade with tears in her eyes. That was my home once, she whispered. Elias turned to her gently. Then let this be its end. You're not bound to it anymore. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I feel lighter. Good, he said softly. You deserve to. For a while, neither spoke. The hum of the ship was the only sound. Lyra sat quietly by the window, watching the remains of the dreadnought drift into the void. The stars reflected in her golden eyes, calm and endless. Elias worked at the control panel, but his thoughts kept drifting to her. He had seen many strange things in his life, but nothing quite like her. Someone who had been frozen, forgotten, yet still carried so much strength. After a long silence, she spoke again. Elias, yeah? What is home to you? She asked softly. He thought for a moment. Home isn't a place, he said. It's the people who make you feel safe. She nodded slowly, her voice gentle. Then you are my home. Elias blinked, surprised. He opened his mouth to reply, but no words came. Instead, he just smiled quietly. Guess that makes two of us. They shared a small laugh, soft and real. It was the first time Lyra laughed without fear. Later, as she slept in the med bay, Elias sat beside her, studying the faint pulse of her markings. His AI spoke quietly. Captain analysis complete. Her energy signature changed. The connection she used to disable the dreadnought, it's still active, but now it's linked to your biofield. Elias frowned. My what? Her systems bonded to yours during the event, it seems. She anchored herself to your life force to survive. He looked at her, realizing what that meant. So if something happens to me, she may not survive, the AI finished. Elias exhaled slowly. Then I guess I'll have to stay alive. Hours later, Lyra woke and found him still sitting there, his eyes half closed. You should rest, she said softly. I'll rest when you're better, he replied with a smile. She sat up, touching her glowing hands. I feel strange, like part of me is with you. Elias chuckled softly. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. She tilted her head, confused but smiling. Maybe that is what humans call bond, he nodded. Yeah, something like that. The next day, the Sol runner passed near a blue planet. Its surface sparkled with oceans and clouds. Lyra stood beside Elias in the cockpit. Beautiful, she whispered. Yeah, he said. We can stop there. Get you real air and sunlight for a change. When the ship landed on a quiet beach, Lyra stepped out slowly. The wind touched her face, warm and soft. She looked around with wide eyes, the golden light of the sun reflecting off her silver skin. I never see place like this, she said in awe. Elias smiled. Then take it all in. You've earned it, she turned to him. You always give without wanting back. Why? He looked at the waves and shrugged. Because maybe one day someone did the same for me, and I never forgot. She thought about that quietly, then reached out, placing her glowing hand over his chest. The light from her markings spread faintly across his shirt, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then I remember you, she whispered. He looked down at her hand and smiled softly. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. As the sun set, painting the sky in colors of fire and gold, they stood together on the sand. Lyra closed her eyes, breathing deeply, feeling alive for the first time without fear. The pain of her past faded with the sound of the waves. Elias watched her, knowing this was only the beginning of something neither of them fully understood. A bond that reached beyond stars and species. She had been left to die and forgotten, but now she had found something greater, a reason to live. The sun rose slowly over the quiet blue planet, spilling soft light across the shore. The waves touched the sand gently, leaving lines of foam behind. Lyra stood barefoot near the water, her long silver hair moving with the breeze. Her glowing markings shimmered softly in the morning light. She had never seen anything so peaceful. For the first time since she woke from the cryopod, she wasn't afraid. Elias watched her from the ship's ramp, a small smile on his face. He held a cup of coffee in one hand and his jacket in the other. You look like someone seeing the world for the first time, he said with a grin. She turned, smiling shyly. It feels new, warm, alive. He walked closer, handing her his jacket. You might need this. Human skin handles sun better than yours. She slipped it on carefully. It was too big for her, but she hugged it around her shoulders like it was something precious. Smells like stars, she said softly. Elias laughed. That's just old ship grease, but she shook her head. No, smells like home. They walked along the shore together, the sound of the ocean wrapping around them like music. For a while, neither spoke. Lyria's steps were slow, as if she wanted to feel every grain of sand under her feet. The sunlight caught her golden eyes, making them sparkle. Elias glanced at her. So what will you do now? You're free to go anywhere. She looked out at the horizon. Anywhere, she repeated, then turned to him. But I not want to go alone. He smiled softly. Then stay. I could use someone who can hack alien tech with her hands glowing. She laughed lightly, the sound bright and soft. And I could use someone who flies into storms to save strangers. Elias nodded. Deal. They sat down on a large rock, watching the waves. The ship rested quietly behind them. For a long while they said nothing, but the silence was comfortable. Lyria's thoughts drifted to everything that had happened. The frozen years, the fear, the machines, and now this strange peace. She turned to Elias and said, I never think I live to see light again. My world ended long time ago. Then you come, he looked at her, eyes calm. I didn't do much, she shook her head. You did everything. You came when no one else would. You saw me when I was forgotten. Elias looked out at the sea. You know, I think we were both a little lost before we met. You in that pod, me drifting around the stars looking for junk? She smiled softly. Now we both found something. Yeah, he said quietly. We did. As the day passed, Elias worked on repairing the Sol Runner's systems while Lyria explored the shore. She collected small seashells, touching them carefully as if they were fragile treasures. When she found one shaped like a spiral, she ran back to the ship and handed it to him.
For you, she said proudly.
Gift. He looked at the tiny shell and smiled. Thanks. Haven't gotten one of these before. Keep it, she said. To remember. Remember what? That you saved me, she said simply. Elias looked at her for a long moment. I don't think I'll ever forget. As night fell, the two sat outside under a sky full of stars. The air was cool and the sound of the ocean was soft and steady. Lyria sat close beside him, her glowing markings faintly lighting the sand around them. So many stars, she whispered. Yeah, Elias said. Every one of them has a story. She looked at him. Then maybe one of them will tell ours. He smiled. Maybe. A story about a human who couldn't mind his own business and an alien who wouldn't stay dead. She laughed again, leaning her head lightly on his shoulder. I like that story. For a long while they sat like that, quiet, content, and alive. The stars reflected in her eyes and her breathing matched the rhythm of the waves. After some time, Lyria looked up at him. Elias, when you found me, did you think I was human? He thought for a moment. Didn't matter. I just saw someone who needed help. Her smile was soft and full of emotion. That is why you're kind different. You help even when worlds say no. My people never understand that, he looked at her gently. Maybe your people forgot what it means to care. But you can remind them one day. She nodded slowly. Maybe, but for now I stay. I learn, with you. Elias chuckled. Guess I'm not getting rid of you then. She pretended to frown. You try and I hack your ship. They both laughed, the sound echoing softly through the quiet beach. As dawn approached again, Lyria stood near the water once more. The wind brushed her hair and she looked up at the sky. Elias joined her, hands in his pockets. Thinking about leaving? He asked. She shook her head. Thinking about how strange it is. To be alive again, to feel wind, to hear waves. She looked at him with a small smile. And to not be alone. Elias nodded. You're not alone anymore. Not ever. She reached out, touching his arm gently. You promise? He smiled. I promise. The two of them stood side by side, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The light grew brighter, painting the sky in gold and pink. The warmth touched their faces, and for a moment everything felt right. Lyria turned to him one last time. You came for me when world forgot me. I will never forget that. Elias looked at her with a quiet smile. And I'll never forget that you made the stars feel alive again. She smiled softly, the golden glow in her eyes reflecting the new day. Then maybe, she said, we both saved each other. The wind carried her words into the open air, gentle and full of truth. And as the Sol Runner lifted from the sand a few hours later, heading toward the endless sky, one thing was certain. Neither of them was forgotten anymore. They had found light in the darkness, and that light would guide them wherever they went next.